Welcome back to Tethered and Whole. I'm Matt, and today we're talking about something that quietly shapes our stress, our focus, and our sense of mental clutter, often without us realizing it. The Ziegarnik effect explains why unfinished tasks linger in our minds, and learning how to work with that reality rather than against it can help us feel more whole instead of constantly pulled apart by everything we haven't finished yet. Let me start with a feeling you know so well. You sit down at the end of a day, finally still, and instead of relief, your brain lights up. You remember the email you didn't answer, the lesson you didn't quite finish, the conversation that ended awkwardly in the hallway, the form you started but never submitted. Nothing is actively happening, but everything feels unfinished. And somehow those incomplete things feel louder than the 10 things you actually did complete that day. There's a reason for that. Psychologists call it the Ziegarnik effect, a phenomenon where unfinished tasks remain more vivid in our memory than completed ones. It was first identified by Ziegarnik, who noticed back in the 1920s that people remembered interrupted or incomplete tasks better than they remembered finished ones. Turns out our brains are not wired for tidy closure. They're wired for tension, for open loops, for don't forget this yet. And in modern life, especially in education, we are absolutely swimming in open loops. Think about technology for a moment. Notifications, emails, learning platforms, messaging apps. Every ping is a tiny interruption, and every interruption creates a new fragment of unfinished business. You sit down to grade essays, and halfway through, a parent email pops up. So you read it. You don't respond yet. Now that email joins a growing crowd of mental tabs open in the background of your mind. And in the fear of missing out, what if that message was urgent? What if I forget? And suddenly your nervous system is juggling far more than the task in front of you. Then there are the literal open tabs, browser tabs, unread emails, half-written documents. Each one is a visual reminder of something incomplete. And here's the cruel irony. The more tabs we leave open so we don't forget, the harder it becomes to focus enough to actually finish any of them. A teacher with 15 tabs open, lesson plans, curriculum maps, student data, often feels frozen, not because they don't care, but because their attention is being pulled and divided in 15 different directions at once. The Ziegarnik effect shows up in our goals, too. We tend to remember the goals we didn't meet more clearly than the ones we did. You might vividly recall the professional growth goal that fell short, while barely remembering the 2 goals you quietly and consistently successfully accomplished. Unfinished goals stay mentally active, and that can sting. But it can also be useful because that mental stickiness can increase persistence when it's handled intentionally. It shows up in relationships as well. Unfinished conversations, unresolved conflicts, a tense exchange about hallway duty or coverage that never fully quite got addressed. Those moments don't just disappear when we walk away. They sit down, they pitch their tents, and they take up residence in our brain. They drain cognitive energy, and often the relief doesn't come from winning the argument, but simply from closing the loop. Maybe it's naming the issue, clarifying the expectations, restoring some sense of resolution. Now, unfinished business isn't all bad. In fact, some people have learned to harness it. A great example, Ernest Hemingway famously stopped writing in the middle of a sentence each day so he would know exactly where to begin next day, and it kept his mind churning on his story when he wasn't writing. The unfinished thought pulled him back to the page. That's the Ziegarnik effect working for you instead of against you. The key difference here, folks, intention. When unfinished tasks pile up unintentionally, they fuel anxiety. When they're left open strategically, they can fuel motivation. That's why certain productivity strategies actually work. Breaking large products into smaller pieces keeps motivation alive without overwhelming us. A teacher revising curriculum maps doesn't need to finish everything. They just need to leave the next unit mentally active and approachable. Time-based work strategies do something similar. When you stop a task while you still know what comes next, mid-bullet point, maybe mid-sentence, you make it easier to return. Your brain already has the hook. Deadlines and accountability work the same way. They increase the mental salience of unfinished work, nudging us toward follow-through. That's why grading suddenly moves faster when the deadline is real, when it's visible and it's shared. And managing distractions, closing the door during your prep hour, silencing notifications, choosing one task, it reduces the number of open loops competing for attention at the same time. So, folks, here's the balance we're aiming for. Left unmanaged, the Ziegarnik effect becomes a constant hum of stress. All those unfinished emails, unresolved conflicts, half-graded papers, all vying for attention. But when approached intentionally, it becomes a tool. Leaving something unfinished on purpose can create momentum. Breaking goals into smaller steps can sustain energy. Choosing which loops stay open and which get closed gives you back a sense of control. And that's really where the heart of this is, not eliminating unfinished business, but deciding how much of it you're actually willing to carry at once. Let me offer a simple strategy you can try this week. Look at your to-do list, not the whole thing, just today's version or today's section, and start with the low-hanging fruit, the items that are easy to complete and offer a high return. Close a few loops early on. Let your brain experience the completion, because every finished task quiets the background noise just a little bit, making it easier to focus on what actually matters next. And then, for one task, just one, try stopping before you're done. Leave yourself a clear on-ramp, mid-sentence, mid-outline, mid-thought. Let the Ziegarnik effect work overnight so tomorrow morning doesn't feel like starting from scratch. Unfinished business, unfortunately, maybe fortunately, will always be a part of teaching. The work is never really done. But when you understand how your brain responds to incompletion, you can stop fighting it and start shaping it. And that shift from being pulled by every open loop to choosing which ones actually matter is one of the ways we protect our energy, our focus, and our sense of wholeness. Thanks for spending some time with me this week on Tethered and Whole. Close a few loops this week and leave one open on purpose. And I'll see you next time.